I woke up in a wedding dress that wasn't mine, in a body that technically was, standing in front of an altar with a groom I'd never met, and the first thing I heard wasn't the officiant. It was a comment, hovering in the air where only I could apparently see it. Wait, is this the substitute bride arc already? I thought we had 2 more chapters before Elena runs off with the stable hand. I blinked at it. It didn't blink back. Beside me, the groom, tall, unreasonably composed for a man about to marry a stranger, glanced down at me like he'd noticed something was off. My name, according to the wedding program clutched in my shaking hand, was Wren Calloway, and according to the second comment that popped up a breath later, Wren wasn't even supposed to be at this wedding. She's not the sister who was supposed to marry him. The real bride left a note on her nightstand 2 hours ago. Nobody's found it yet. I felt my stomach drop somewhere near my ridiculous heeled shoes. The officiant asked if anyone objected. Nobody did, mostly because nobody but me knew there was anything to object to. The groom, Julian Ashford, according to the program, heir to a shipping fortune the comments seemed weirdly obsessed with, said his vows in a voice that carried no warmth and no doubt, like a man reading terms and conditions he'd already resigned himself to. When it was my turn, I said the words too, because a floating comment materialized directly in front of my face that read, "Say them, trust me, you don't want to be standing at this altar when the truth comes out instead." And something about the phrasing made my knees lock in place and my mouth move without much say from my brain. We were married in 11 minutes. The reception was worse. I sat beside a man who hadn't looked directly at me once, surrounded by people who kept calling me by my sister's name, because apparently in this story, Wren had a sister, Camille, who was engaged to Julian for 3 years before vanishing that morning, and every few minutes another comment would drift past my vision like a subtitle nobody else could read. He doesn't know yet. Someone tell him before the toast. Oh my God, he's about to give the toast. The toast happened. Julian stood, raised his glass, and thanked everyone for witnessing his marriage to Camille Calloway. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet right before something breaks. I watched 300 wedding guests slowly turn to look at me, and I watched Julian's jaw tighten as he realized, in real time, in front of everyone, that the woman he'd just married was not the woman whose name he'd just said. The comments went absolutely feral. He said the wrong name at his own wedding? The wrong name. Someone catch the best man, he just spat champagne across the table. This is either the best or worst thing that's ever happened at a Calloway family event, and honestly it's both. Julian set his glass down very carefully, the way people set things down when they'd rather throw them. He looked at me, really looked, for the first time since the altar, and asked, quietly enough that only I could hear it under the noise of 300 confused guests, "Who are you?" I could have lied. A comment actually suggested I lie, pretend you're Camille, buy yourself a day, figure out an exit plan. But another comment, right beneath it, said don't, he'll find out anyway and it'll be so much worse, and honestly that one felt truer. So I told him. I'm Wren. Camille's sister. I don't know why I'm wearing her dress or why I said your vows or why I woke up standing at this altar instead of asleep in my apartment 40 minutes from here, but I'm not her, and I think she's gone. Something moved behind his eyes, controlled and fast, like a man doing math he didn't want to be doing at his own reception. Gone where? He asked. I don't know, I said honestly, and then, because the comment had been right about trusting it earlier, I let myself say the rest. But there was a note. Nobody's found it yet. His jaw worked once. Then he took my hand, my actual hand, the one still wearing a ring that fit a finger it wasn't sized for, and said, to the room at large, in a voice that had gone flat and final, "If you'll excuse us." He walked me out of my own accidental wedding reception like a man closing a business deal he hadn't finished reading, and behind us, the comments trailed along like they weren't ready to stop watching either. This is not the wedding chapter 1, remember. Something changed. Somebody changed something. Guys, I don't think this is the story anymore. I don't think this is the story anymore either, and unlike them, I had to actually live in it. The note was exactly where the comment said it would be, on Camille's nightstand, in handwriting too neat for someone supposedly fleeing her own wedding. "I'm sorry. I can't marry a man I don't love to save a company I don't care about. Don't look for me." And Julian read it twice standing in his own foyer while I hovered near the door in a dress that no longer felt like a costume and more like evidence. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then a comment slid into view above his shoulder, visible only to me. "He's not sad. Watch his hands." I watched his hands. They weren't shaking with grief. They were steady in the specific way of someone recalculating. "I don't love her either," he said finally, folding the note along its existing creases like he was filing it away rather than mourning it. "This marriage was never about love, Miss Calloway. It was collateral for a merger her father structured badly, and now that she's gone, the collateral defaulted, which technically makes this marriage," he looked at me properly for the first time, "a very expensive mistake, unless we don't undo it." I opened my mouth to say something reasonable, like annulment, and a comment beat me to my own thoughts. "He's about to propose keeping the marriage. Don't panic. This is actually the better outcome for Ren, trust the process." I did not trust the process, but I also had $40, no job in the city, a missing sister, and a groom who was looking at me like a spreadsheet with a promising new variable. "If we stay married," he said, "her father's company survives the quarter, my board stops asking questions, and you," his eyes flicked over the dress, the ring, the general disaster of me, "get whatever protection comes with the Ashford name until we sort out where your sister actually went." "What do you get out of it?" I asked, because it seemed like the thing Ren would ask, practical and slightly suspicious, and also because a comment had just typed itself directly into my line of sight reading, "Ask him what he gets. This is the part nobody asks and it matters." "Time," he said simply. "Just time." I agreed, mostly because I didn't have a better plan and partly because the comments had developed an uncomfortable habit of being right. The next 6 weeks were a strange, careful truce. Julian was polite, distant, occasionally almost kind in the accidental way of someone who forgot to keep his guard up, bringing me coffee before a meeting because he'd noticed I liked it, correcting a lawyer who called me the substitute bride to my face. The comments noted these moments with an intensity that made me self-conscious. He remembered her coffee order after one conversation. He remembered. "Sir, you are supposed to be emotionally unavailable. Please reread your own character notes." But it wasn't all careful truces. Camille's business partner, a sleek, perfectly composed woman named Priya Okafor who ran the PR side of the Calloway Holdings, started showing up more often than made sense, settling into meetings I hadn't been invited to, standing a little too close to Julian at events, watching me across rooms with an expression that the comments flagged before I'd even consciously registered it. "She's not worried about Camille. Watch how she talks about her. She talks about her like a problem that solved itself." I started watching Priya the way you watch Whether That's About to Turn, and 3 weeks later, when a photograph of me leaving a lawyer's office got leaked to a gossip site with the caption "The substitute wife is already shopping for a divorce settlement," the comments were unambiguous about where it came from. "That's Priya's account. Same device that posted the wedding photos. She's been feeding stories since the reception." I brought it to Julian, who read the leak, then read my face, and asked, quietly, "Do you have proof?" And I realized, with a small cold clarity, that I'd been documenting things without fully meaning to. Screenshots, timestamps, a growing folder on my phone I'd started the week the comments first warned me not to trust anyone smiling too easily. "I have proof," I said, and something in his expression shifted, not quite trust yet, but the specific attention of a man deciding to look somewhere he hadn't looked before. The comments, for once, went quiet in the good way. Finally. Somebody's paying attention. Priya's unraveling didn't happen all at once, which the comments kept insisting was realistic even as I found it excruciating to sit through in real time. First the leak, then a second leak 2 weeks later timed exactly to a board vote that would have gone badly for her if it hadn't gone worse for me first, framing me as a woman engineering sympathy to secure a bigger settlement. Julian believed the framing for exactly one evening, long enough to ask me across a cold dinner table whether I'd talk to a reporter, and I felt something in my chest go very still. Because a comment had already told me this exact moment was coming and I still hadn't been ready for how much it would hurt. He's going to ask if you leaked it. Stay calm. This is the test chapter, not the ending. I didn't leak anything, I told him, and I have the folder to prove it, timestamps and everything, because apparently I've been building a legal case against your business partner since the week I married you by accident. He was quiet for a long time, and then he asked to see it, and I showed him, and the folder did what folders do. It told a story that didn't care about anyone's feelings, just facts laid end to end, Priya's login times against leak times, a pattern too consistent to be coincidence. He sat with it for a long time after that, and the comment that finally appeared felt almost gentle for once. He's not going to apologize out loud yet. He doesn't know how. Give him a minute. He didn't apologize out loud that night. What he did instead was quietly restructure Priya's access to company communications the next morning without telling her why, which the comments found almost as satisfying as an apology, and which I found colder and somehow more convincing. Priya noticed within the week. She came to my apartment. I still had my own apartment, a small stubborn fact I'd refused to give up even after moving most of my things into Julian's house, and stood in my doorway with none of her usual polish, asking, very directly, "What did you tell him?" And I said, the truth, mostly, because I'd learned there wasn't much point performing anything else anymore. She laughed, short and humorless. "You think you're the heroine of this? You think this ends with him choosing you?" "I don't think anything," I said. "I think I got dragged into a wedding I didn't sign up for and I've been trying to survive it since, and somewhere in there a comment had already warned me she'll try to make you feel small, don't let her. This is the part where you find out you don't need his validation to know what's true." So I didn't flinch, and something about that seemed to unsettle her more than any accusation would have. She left without saying whatever she'd come to say. 2 days later, an anonymous tip landed in a financial journalist's inbox with documentation of irregular transfers between a shell account and Priya's personal holdings, timed suspiciously close to each leak, and the comments were thrilled in a way that felt slightly alarming. "That's not from Ren's folder. Someone else sent that." "Wait, is Julian's assistant secretly the real second lead? I want a spin-off." The tip wasn't from me. I never found out for certain who sent it, though a comment I chose not to examine too closely suggested Julian's assistant had been building her own file the entire time, quietly, the way people do when they've worked for someone long enough to notice patterns before their boss does. Priya's position at the company dissolved within a month, not with fanfare, just a quiet departure and a press release that used the word mutual the way press releases always do. Julian found me in the kitchen the night it was finalized, and instead of saying anything about Priya at all, he said, "I should have believed you the first time, and I want you to know it wasn't because I doubted the folder. It was because believing it meant admitting how badly I'd misjudged someone I'd trusted for years, and that was easier to postpone than face." "That's an honest answer," I said, surprised by how much I meant it, and the comment that drifted by afterwards simply read, "Oh, they're actually talking now," like it hadn't quite expected this either. Camille turned up 11 days later, not missing, not in danger, just settled quietly in a coastal town 3 hours north with a man she'd apparently been in love with for 2 years and had never once mentioned to anyone, and when she called me, not Julian, me, her voice was steady in a way I hadn't heard from her in years. "I heard what happened," she said. "I'm sorry I left you holding it. I didn't think anyone would actually make you go through with the ceremony." I laughed before I could stop myself, a little wrecked around the edges. "Someone did. It's a long story." I told her the short version, the wedding and the note and the marriage that had somehow become real without either of us fully agreeing to it, and she was quiet for a moment before she said, "Are you happy?" And I realized I didn't have to think very hard about the answer, which surprised me more than the question did. "I think I might be," I told her, and a comment appeared gently in the corner of my vision, unbothered for once, just watching. "She means it. Look at that. She actually means it." Julian and I never had a second wedding, which the comments seemed faintly disappointed by, muttering things like we were promised a redo ceremony. Where is our redo ceremony? But we did have a quiet dinner on the anniversary of the accidental one. Just the two of us, no board members, no leaked photographs, no floating text warning me what was coming next, because somewhere in the last several months the comments had started thinning out, appearing less and less, like a story that had finally stopped needing to warn me about its own plot. He raised his glass that night, the same gesture from the reception, except this time he got the name right on the first try, and said, to Ren Calloway, who I did not choose on purpose and would choose again on purpose every day after that, and I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight since the moment I first opened my eyes at that altar. It's a low bar, I told him, marrying me by accident and then deciding I was worth keeping, and he said, it's not a low bar if it's the truest thing I've ever gotten right, and honestly, the comments would have had a field day with that line if there'd been any left to see it. There weren't. The last one showed up months later, small and unhurried, drifting past while I stood in the kitchen of the house that had somehow become mine, watching Julian argue cheerfully with a contractor about paint colors for a room we hadn't told anyone yet was going to be a nursery. She got the ending nobody wrote for her. Turns out that's the best kind. I stood there for a second, waiting for another one, a warning, a spoiler, anything, but the air stayed quiet, ordinary, mine. Julian looked over, catching me smiling at nothing. What? He asked. Nothing, I said, and meant it the way you mean it when nothing has finally, for once, stopped needing an explanation. I came to that wedding as somebody's replacement, wearing somebody else's name, warned every step of the way by comments that thought they knew exactly how my story was supposed to go. They didn't, not really. I did. And for the first time since I'd woken up at that altar, that felt like enough.